Time for football at 4 here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Johnny Mac's in the house. Of course, we talk football every day at this time. We got football games this weekend. We got off-season news and notes on the horizon. We got the draft coming up as well. And here to break it down with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles and NFL insider John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Johnny Mac, welcome back.
How are you guys?
I'm doing exceptional today. I feel very refreshed after a long day yesterday, but we got a lot happening here as we get ready to dive into these games this weekend. Now, the other day, we talked a little bit about the AFC coaches. Coaches are such an important part of the NFL game. I want to get into this NFC side of things because I find it interesting. The two guys here, both young guys, both Matt LaFleur is a guy who was just hired, first year on the job, and I'm interested in him as what kind of role he has in this weekend's game for Green Bay.
Yeah, kind of a weird season for Green Bay because they kind of morphed from a team heavily reliant on Aaron Rodgers, understandably so, one of the greatest quarterbacks who's ever lived. But for years and years and years, they never gave Rodgers enough on the other side of the football. Then all of a sudden, they get an offensive coach and they get good on defense. So it's kind of weird how things have broken for Green Bay this season. And it's tough to say. I mean, he's a rookie coach in the NFC Championship game. Yeah. So by definition, he's a success. I haven't been impressed. It's weird. But they keep finding ways to win in football games. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm not a big Green Bay guy, and I haven't been all season. Like, just haven't been all that impressed with them. But here they are. What is it about Green Bay that has them here?
Well, it's the defense, and particularly Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. And they got both those players free agency, which is something they never did for years when Ted Thompson was there. They believed building in-house, building through the draft, really dove into free agency. And when they did, they didn't make splashes. They didn't go after big-time players. And they shifted gears, and they hit home runs. Zadarius Smith should have been and should be. I mean, some of the awards are already been given out, but the official AP NFL Defensive Player of the Year, it's going to be Stephon Gilmore, and the Pro Football Writers just voted that way this week. But he should be in that conversation. That's how dominant he has been defensively. And Preston Smith isn't that far behind. He's had a great year as well. And they've done a good job drafting cornerbacks specifically, and they're pretty deep in the secondary. So they're as I said, shifted their identity to a defensive football team. But you still have Aaron Rodgers, and you saw it down the stretch of the Seattle game. When the spectacular play hasn't been there for the most part this year, but he can still make throws in key situations that basically nobody else on the planet can make.
Yeah, and by the way, Matt LaFleur gave his team off today. No practice today in pads, I should say, for Green Bay as they get ready for San Francisco. So Matt LaFleur on the one side, he was the offensive coordinator, in Tennessee before that? Is that where he came from?
Yes. Yes, so he was...
Which wasn't exactly a high-profile offense.
No. In fact, they were underachieving, and a lot of that had to do with Marcus Mariota. So he didn't bowl people over as a hire to begin with because Tennessee wasn't that effective offensively. And now you look at Tennessee, and they're in the AFC Championship game, so they're pretty good. But their turnaround started with the move away from Marcus Mariota, obviously, to Ryan Tannehill.
And then on the other side, you got Kyle Shanahan, who was obviously the play caller with the Atlanta Falcons when they were in the Super Bowl and has a lineage there. But they have really turned that franchise around pretty quickly.
Yeah, they have. John Lynch was just named Executive of the Year by the Pro Football Writers today, actually. So he won that award, I think, deservedly so. He's built that roster up to the point where over the past few seasons that I think they're the most talented team in the NFL from 1 through 53. And they have so much talent, especially up front defensively. You saw their running game last week, how effective that was. Offensive line is, you talk about first-round picks there. Mike McGlinchey, for instance. Joe Staley's been there for a long time, but nonetheless, they have a lot of talent. They have 3 different running backs who aren't big names, but they're all effective. And then even sort of complementing that with Deebo Samuel, a rookie receiver. We've talked a lot about rookies. They've done a really, really good job, and I think they have the most well-balanced roster in the NFL right now.
Yeah, and, about Shanahan, I mean, at that time when he was the play caller for Atlanta, a lot of people thought he was the best play caller in the league, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, they still do. I mean, he's the guy. If you talk about scheming play calls, he's the guy. That's the name that's going to be brought up first, Kyle Shanahan, and I think rightfully so. He does a really good job with mesh concepts in the passing game, does a really good job in the screen game. I just talked about the running game. There's so many different runs. They don't have Derrick Henry. They don't even, last week they had to face Dalvin Cook. They don't have a running back like that, but they still find a way to be very effective running the football, and a lot of it is scheme-based.
Yeah, because if you look at San Francisco, I don't know, the names don't pop out at you, right? I mean, they've got an interesting when you watch them, they have so much speed, but there's not a guy that comes up first off the tip of your tongue when you talk about that team, which kind of goes to what you're saying, John, how good of a schemer and play caller he is.
Yeah, I mean, talent-wise, I think they're more talented on the defensive side of the ball, and that's where the stars are. You look at Nick Bosa, another rookie. I mean, he's a star. He's just better than most people he's going up against. And they've got so many first-round picks. Eric Armstead, I mean, people don't think about him. He's just a physical freak. They have so much talent up front on defense. Offensively, they don't have superstars. They don't have a superstar quarterback. They don't have superstar running backs. They don't have superstar receivers. George Kittle being the notable exception. He's a superstar, and he's the best tight end in football, but he's also a 5th-round pick. It's somebody who it wasn't expected of. So they've done a good job developing players and drafting as well.
Yep, and this one should be interesting on the NFC side because you do have 2 younger coaches and LaFleur in his first year going at it, whereas Andy's kind of the one outlier here as the old head. Everybody else is kind of they're all the new kids on the block.
Yeah, well, Andy's always there, and it's rare, obviously, that Bill Belichick is not there. You almost expect those 2 guys to be in a situation where if they have a good particular game day, they're going to be in the championship game or the Super Bowl. And Andy's in that position again. I've talked about it before on the show. I think this is his easiest path to the final goal ever, and we'll see if he can finish it. I mean, there's no reason they shouldn't beat the Tennessee Titans at home, and they're the best team. They should beat whoever wins between San Francisco and Green Bay.
Well, and
they're the best team left.
Yeah, and one of the reasons is because of Patrick Mahomes, and he's actually come out and said he'll be happier for Andy Reid than he would be for his own self if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. It kind of goes back to how much the players love playing for Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I think people see the narrative and that Andy supposedly can't win the big one, and they do enjoy playing for him. So even as players here would kind of tell you that same thing and have that same sentiment. And the hope is to get them over that hump. And then if you do, obviously that narrative goes away. But it's not only Patrick Mahomes, but I talk about, Mahomes, a former MVP already. If it wasn't for Lamar Jackson and, his injury, you might be talking about another MVP, and who knows how many MVPs in the future. But I often wonder, even with a guy who's that talented and he's been that successful, talk about, where you land in the draft is very important. I don't know if Patrick Mahomes is in Cleveland or the New York Jets. I don't think he's the same guy.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, he knows, and everybody who's played for Andy knows. They're lucky to be playing for somebody like that.
So I don't know what to make of this news with Antonio Brown, but if Drew Rosenhaus is terminating you, it seems like he's got a lot of problems, and that this could be the sign that he is done, and the options of him getting back in the league could be minimal.
Well, did you see the video that TMZ had where he's screaming at the Hollywood, Florida police?
Yep.
I mean, that guy's been off the rails for a while. Yeah, I always find it interesting when someone you employ fires you. So it's only happened a scant few times.
Yeah, Johnny Manziel got fired.
Yeah, exactly. That was the other guy. And it was Drew at one point. He got fired by two agents. Drew was one of them. So this is the second time Drew has done that.
Yep, and so Rosenhaus conditionally terminates this relationship here. So Brown has no agent, and Rosenhaus has informed him, hey, by the way, I'm no longer representing you anymore. So at this point, do you anticipate somebody else jumping at him? Is he an attractive client?
No, I think he's got to go through some steps to do it, similar to what happened with Johnny Manziel. And
Manziel's never got a sniff, right? Has he even got as much as a workout?
No, I think he had a breakfast with Sean Payton once. That's the one I recall. Sean actually talked to him. Remember, he went up to the CFL for a very short period and then didn't go to practice, and even they got rid of him. But Darren Heitner, who's Antonio's personal lawyer, also dropped him today. So bad day for Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
But when you keep acting like an idiot in public, people don't want to be involved with you.
Yeah, no doubt. And the fact is, this season went on without Antonio Brown, and people, life moves on without you pretty quickly, doesn't it, man?
Certainly in the NFL. I mean, even for different reasons, as good as a player, for instance, that Luke Kuechly was, and I think he's a Hall of Fame player. Hey, this league will quickly forget him. You saw Andrew Luck, superstar quarterback. I mean, yeah, the train keeps moving, whether you're on or off it.
Yep. All right. Earlier today, we were discussing some Eagles stuff, so I want to get in with you as well. Obviously, wide receiver and secondary seem to be two off-season options. Which of these which of them is an easier fix, and which one is a bigger problem?
I would say corner would be the bigger problem. In theory, if you have veteran players, Deshaun Jackson returning, which I imagine they will cross their fingers and hope he'll be able to be healthy. Alshon Jeffrey is still a competent guy, but obviously his injury and the timing of it, it's very unlikely, I would think, that he would be ready for week one anyway. But the Eagles are going to have a very difficult time trading him. They certainly can't just walk away from the contract. It would be too much dead money. So at some point in the season, you would expect him to return. So there's some veteran guys who understand, who know how to play, is what I'm trying to say, at the receiver position.
Right,
whereas
in-house.
at corner,
their in-house options seem to be better.
Yeah. Whereas at corner, you're talking about Jalen Mills is a free agent. Who knows if he's back? Ronald Darby is a free agent. He's not going to be back. And then you're talking about a bunch of young players who really haven't developed to this point to where you can say this guy is a definite, this guy's a constant. Certainly Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas are in that column. Even Avonte Maddox, I mean, he hasn't developed to the point where you would say, okay, you don't have to worry about this particular position. So there's more development needed, I think, at corner. But both situations are pretty bad, to be honest.
Yeah, and the point you make is they have some in-house guys that, if they come back and are healthy, that you can at least – so does that mean they turn their attention more so in free agency to corner, and because the draft is so plentiful at wide receiver, they go that route, or they're like, we can't bank on us hitting on wide receivers either. We need help over there.
Well, definitely at the top of the draft. I mean, it's not a big corner draft. It is a big receiver draft. So you don't want to get
in the draft. 21.
Yeah, you don't want to put yourself in that box. I mean, it's just by the nature of how many good players that you have at position, you want to bring a good player in. You don't want to force it. So I think at least early in the draft, it's more likely receiver than corner. But that's always dependent on the particular draft, the year, and what players are going to be involved, where you're going to pick. And I don't know if there's going to be a lot of corners worthy of picking there, even though it's probably a bigger need.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about Deshaun Jackson. Is there a possibility that he would not be back next year?
Very unlikely, because same reason for Alshon. Not quite as bad, but it would be a significant salary cap hit. The number's not too outrageous to where it's going to be an albatross to keep him around. And they saw the impact. It was only one game, but they saw the impact that he could potentially have on this offense versus the impact of what he wasn't on there. So they realized what he can add to the mix. So I think what I just said, that you cross your fingers and you hope he stays healthy. The fact, though, that he's going to be 33 at a thoroughbred position, that's not a good plan, but I think it's the best plan you can come up with.
So yesterday we brought up the name Jason Garrett. He interviewed with the Giants, and today former Giants head coach Bob McAdoo is interviewing for offensive coordinator jobs. Mike McCoy for the quarterback. Those were like the creme de la creme head coaching candidates in 2016. You think, the Eagles...
Well, I wish it was Bob McAdoo. He was a hell of a player in the NBA, but Ben
McAdoo. Did I say Bob?
Who could have been the head coach of the
Did
Eagles.
I say? I was going to say, the Eagles wanted Ben McAdoo to be their head coach. Yeah. Would they now turn to him to be their offensive coordinator?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, he's been out for 2 years now. That's rare. I mean, there's a lot of times head coaches will sit out a year and try to get back into the mix. He's been out a while. Mike McCoy's an interesting name because he visited training camp this summer.
And correct me if I'm wrong, John. When McCoy was in San Diego, I mean, he had come from he was very high sought of this offensive mind.
Yeah, and that's how quickly things turn. So was McAdoo. I mean, McAdoo at one point, the Giants and Eagles were fighting over him, and before that, when the Giants hired him, he's coming off Green Bay, has really big reputation. So it kind of tells you just how quickly those things move and churn. And head coaching has so much more to do with other things than X's and O's. And I think more teams are figuring that out, and they're looking more for leadership than anything else, and guys who understand all the different facets of the job. Because X's and O's, we just talked about Kyle Shanahan. Guess what? You got $99. You can buy NFL Game Pass, watch every San Francisco film, watch every Atlanta film, copy every single concept Kyle Shanahan uses, and you can be an X's and O's guy. It's got more to do with other things than X's and O's. And I that's why things move so quickly.
Yeah, it's something we touched on before you came on, John, in the 3 o'clock hour, which was a guy like DiFilippo, for instance. He might be a really good coach because he's willing to kind of be a jerk, and then he rubs you the wrong way, where Groh might be a better coach, but he's not willing to kind of be the jerk, and he's a little bit more passive, which doesn't allow him to be the coach that maybe he can be. But It's what personality do you want in the room if you're the head coach? Because you might say, well, this guy's, I can't be in the same room with this guy. He wants too much, but that doesn't. Like DiFilippo might be a better coach, or Groh might be the better coach, but he's not as aggressive. You don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. I think it also depends on a coach, and I think this is one of Doug Peterson's strengths. It varies from player to player. What you need is a guy who can look at a player. In the old axiom that some people need a pat on the back, some people need a kick in the butt. Yeah. Everybody's different. And if you're a coach in this league, you kind of have to identify the personality and say, what does this guy need? Does this guy need me to be tough? I think John saw that in Carson Wentz and said, look, you're headstrong. And Carson admits this, by the way. Very headstrong guy, very opinionated guy. Likes things his way, and John, kicked him in the butt. And I don't think Preston Taylor does that. I don't think Mike Groh did that.
Right.
Now, I still think he played very well because he's a very talented person, but a different type personality, type A personality. Nick Foles, on the other hand, is not that. And that's where I think John proved himself to be a good coach because Nick wanted just – he's a laid-back guy. He went, tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And he did. And that's you kind of have to feel each different personality. And I think that's what defines coaches, and I think that's always been a strength of Doug Peterson.
Does DiFilippo getting fired in Jacksonville signal that maybe they're not going to go back to Foles?
Not necessarily. I mean, they paid him so much money. They're kind of in a bind. You can get rid of anybody if you really want to.
Such an interesting quarterback offseason, man.
Yeah, you saw Brock Osweiler a couple of years ago when Houston got him into that contract, and they essentially did an NBA-style salary dump. So maybe you can get out of it that way. I think they do realize that Nick Foles isn't what they thought he was, which we all tried to warn them here. But I also think they understand that Gardner Minshew isn't the answer. So, they're in a tough situation. The bottom line is their answer at quarterback is not there. So you have to use the best option you have at your disposal. That's probably still Nick Foles at this point.
Well, it's Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Ryan Tannehill are all free agents. Phillip Rivers is a free agent. Jameis Winston is a free agent. Teddy Bridgewater is a free agent. So there are some options available. I think Andy Dalton is also a free agent. So there's some very intriguing names that are free agents this year at that quarterback position. So this is going to be you got Eli Manning, if he wants to, get a new job and be in the mix there. You got him as a free agent. Case Keenum is a free agent again. He's a guy who's played in an NFC championship game. So there's a lot of interesting intrigue at that quarterback free agent position this year.
Yeah, a lot of bridge guys, and the one with bridge in his name, I think he's the most interesting because I think he could be a starting quarterback. So where he lands, I think a lot of them. Dak's going to be back in Dallas. Even Jameis Winston, I think he's going to be back in Tampa. Tom Brady is going to be interesting for the obvious reasons. I don't know why anyone would want a 43-year-old quarterback starting over, but it is the greatest quarterback of all time. So that makes it a little bit different. And then some of those other guys you mentioned, Andy Dalton being most notable, he's like most quarterbacks. He can be successful if everything around him is clicking. And we just talked about you have to use what's the best option at your disposal. He might be that for somebody.
All right, football at 4 in the books. And tomorrow we're going to look at this games, the two games this weekend. And, of course, you got San Francisco and Green Bay. You can hear that game on 97.3 ESPN. That's your late game, Tennessee and Kansas City. That's your early game. Hear them all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, John.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Football at 4, John McMullen at JF McMullen. Give him a follow on Twitter.